First Contact and the Queen's Warning. The grand halls of the Xilari throne room were unlike anything Captain James Carter had ever seen. The walls shimmered with an eerie blue glow, pulsating like a living organism. The air smelled of something sweet yet metallic, like honey mixed with iron. His boots clicked against the smooth, obsidian-like floor as he walked forward, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes on him. This was a historic moment, the first diplomatic meeting between humans and the Xilari, one of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. The fate of humanity's relationship with these beings rested on his shoulders. At the far end of the massive hall sat Queen Seraphis, the ruler of the Xilari Empire. She was unlike any creature James had encountered before. Her form was tall and regal, draped in shimmering black robes that seemed to shift like liquid shadow. Her skin was deep obsidian, glowing faintly with intricate golden patterns that pulsed like veins of energy. But it was her eyes that held him in place, piercing crimson, burning like twin suns. She radiated power. James swallowed hard, but kept his face neutral. He was here as Earth's representative, and he couldn't afford to show weakness. Behind him stood his two escorts, Commander Riley and Lieutenant Chen. They were tense, gripping their weapons as they observed the silent, armored Xilari guards stationed around the chamber. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. A Xilari attendant stepped forward and spoke in a voice that echoed unnaturally in the chamber. "The Queen will hear your words, human. Speak." James took a slow breath and stepped forward, bowing slightly, not out of submission, but out of respect. "Queen Seraphis," he began, his voice steady, "I come in peace. The United Human Federation wishes to establish diplomatic relations with your great empire. We believe our people can coexist, trade, and learn from each other." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. She simply watched him, her gaze cold and calculating. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice smooth yet commanding. "Humans are reckless. You expand like fire, consuming everything in your path." Her crimson eyes narrowed slightly. "Why should we trust you?" James was prepared for this. He had studied Xilari history and knew their people had suffered betrayal from other alien species before. He needed to convince her that humans were different. "We do not seek war," he said firmly. "We seek allies. The galaxy is dangerous, and unity makes us stronger." The Queen tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, in a movement so fluid it was almost hypnotic, she stood from her throne and descended the steps. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as she walked towards him. She stopped mere inches away, towering over him. James felt the temperature around him drop as an unfamiliar energy pulsed from her form. "You speak of peace," she murmured, her voice softer now, but laced with something unreadable. "Yet you stand before me like a conqueror." Before James could respond, she reached out a single hand, her clawed fingers hovering just above his chest. A strange force pressed against him, almost like an invisible weight. A warning. James knew he had to be careful, but something inside him refused to back down. He had faced war, seen death, and negotiated with ruthless alien leaders before. He would not cower. In that moment, his instincts betrayed him. He lifted his hand and lightly touched hers. It was meant to be a simple gesture, a show of respect, an attempt to bridge the gap between their species. But the moment his fingers made contact with her skin, everything changed. A violent shockwave rippled through the room, sending a deafening pulse of energy outward. James felt his body seize up as an unimaginable heat coursed through his veins, as if his very blood was on fire. His vision blurred, his breath caught in his throat. The Queen's reaction was instant. Her eyes flashed dangerously, and a deep, inhuman growl rumbled from her throat. The Xilari guards drew their weapons, their blades humming with lethal energy. James barely heard his crew shouting behind him, but his focus was locked onto the Queen. She leaned in close, her breath chilling against his burning skin, and whispered 4 words that sent ice through his soul. "Dare touch me again, human, and suffer." Then everything went black. The curse begins. Darkness, a crushing, suffocating darkness. James Carter felt as if he was drifting in an endless void, weightless yet drowning in something unseen. The deep hum filled his ears, like the distant echo of a great machine, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Then came the whisper, soft, seductive, yet laced with a threat. "You touched me, human. Now, you are mine." His body convulsed. Then, suddenly, a gasp, a sharp intake of breath, and blinding pain. James jerked awake, his entire body searing as if he had been set on fire from the inside. His chest heaved, lungs desperate for air. The world around him swam, a blur of shadows and light. He was no longer in the HFY throne room. The sterile glow of the U.S. Valkyrie's med bay flickered above him. The familiar sound of medical scanners and soft beeping surrounded him. The scent of disinfectant mixed with the faint metallic tang of blood. His blood. He groaned, trying to move, but a sharp pain lanced through his limbs, as if his very bones were being rewritten. A voice cut through the haze. "Captain, he's awake." James turned his head slowly, every muscle aching, and saw Commander Riley standing over him. Her usually composed expression was replaced with something close to fear. Beside her, Lieutenant Chen was running a scanner over him, his brows furrowed in deep concentration. James tried to speak, but his throat felt raw, like he had been screaming for hours. What the hell happened to him? Riley leaned in closer, her eyes scanning his face. "James, you were out for almost 12 hours. 12 hours? That wasn't possible." James struggled to sit up, gritting his teeth as his muscles protested. His fingers dug into the sheets of the med bay bed. And that's when he noticed it. His hands. His skin was glowing. Faint golden lines traced his veins, pulsing ever so slightly. Like the patterns on the Queen's skin, like something not human. Panic spiked through him. "What the hell is this?" he rasped, his voice hoarse. Chen hesitated before answering. "We don't know. Your body is changing, Captain." James felt a cold sweat drip down his temple. His mind reeled back to that moment. The Queen's touch, the shockwave, the darkness that swallowed him whole. "The Queen did this," he muttered. Riley crossed her arms, her jaw clenched. "Yeah, no kidding. That's why we got the hell out of there. The second you collapsed, her guards went crazy. We barely escaped with our lives." James closed his eyes, trying to piece everything together. The HFY Queen had warned him. He had touched her. And now something inside him was different. But the real question was, what was happening to him? The whisper in his mind. Hours passed, but the burning in his body didn't stop. If anything, it grew worse. James sat alone in his quarters, staring at his hands under the dim glow of the console screen. The golden lines had spread further, weaving up his arms like veins of liquid light. His reflection in the glass showed the faintest glow in his irises, like dying embers in the dark. A part of him wanted to believe it was some kind of alien infection. Maybe HFY energy had poisoned him. Maybe this was all a side effect. But deep down he knew. This was not an illness. This was a transformation. And then he heard it again. A voice, smooth, velvety, and dangerously close. "You resisted, but you cannot stop it." James froze. His heartbeat hammered in his chest. He wasn't alone in his mind. "Who are you?" he whispered, even though he already knew the answer. The voice chuckled. "You already know, James Carter. The Queen." His fingers clenched into fists. "Get out of my head." A ghostly sensation brushed against his mind, like the soft touch of silk against bare skin. It wasn't painful. It was intoxicating. "You carry my mark now," she purred. "We are connected, bound by something far older than either of us. You are not human anymore, James, not fully. James gritted his teeth. You did this to me. Why? A pause. Then, a whisper. Because you touched me. The air felt heavier, charged with something he couldn't name. James had dealt with aliens before, had fought in wars, and survived the worst the galaxy had to offer. But this was something else. This was intimate, invasive, like the Queen had reached into his very soul and left her mark there. And the worst part, he could feel her too. Somewhere, far across the stars, the Queen was watching him. The warning from the HFY. The door to his quarters hissed open, snapping James back to reality. Riley stood there, a grim expression on her face. We have a problem, she said. James ran a hand over his face, already exhausted. Of course we do. She tossed a datapad onto the table in front of him. The glowing text sent a chill through his spine. Official transmisión from DEXELARI High Council. The human known as Captain James Carter has committed an act of violation against Queen Seraphis. He has been marked by the Queen's energy. He is now a threat to the balance of our kind. The punishment for this crime is death. James let out a slow breath. Riley crossed her arms. They're hunting you, James. The entire auxiliary fleet is mobilizing. James stared at the datapad, then at his own glowing hands. He was no longer just a diplomat or a captain. He was something else now, something that Silari feared, and he had no idea what was coming next. A deadly pursuit. The universe had never felt smaller. James Carter stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie, his fingers clenched around the railing as the warning sirens blared. The ship's AI, EKKO, spoke in a calm but urgent tone. Captain, we have incoming Silari warships. 3 battle cruisers detected. Estimated time to intercept. 4 minutes. James let out a slow breath, trying to push past the dull throb in his skull, the same one that had been getting worse since he woke up, since he touched her. Queen Seraphis. Even now, he could feel her presence like a whisper in the back of his mind, a ghostly touch that refused to fade. But there was no time to dwell on it. Riley's voice cut through the tension. Captain, we need to jump. Now. We can't fight Silari warships and win. James turned to Lieutenant Chen, the ship's navigation officer. Can we plot a jump? Chen was already scanning the star maps. We're too close to the Silari blockade. If we try a blind jump, we might end up in a black hole or worse. James gritted his teeth. They were boxed in, outgunned, and running out of time. He hated running. But this wasn't a fight they could win. Find us an exit, he ordered. Chen nodded, fingers flying across the console, calculating coordinates now. The ship trembled slightly, a reminder that the Silari weren't waiting for them to decide their fate. EKKO spoke again. Enemy vessels have locked weapons. Incoming plasma torpedoes. Riley cursed, braced for impact. A second later, the ship shuddered violently, the force knocking James forward. Sparks exploded from a console to his right as the shields absorbed the brunt of the attack. A deep hiss filled the room, the sound of oxygen leaks. The damage reports flooded in. Shields down to 62%. Hull breach on deck 4. Weapons offline for 30 seconds. They wouldn't survive another hit. James closed his eyes for a split second, willing his mind to focus. His body was still burning, the golden veins beneath his skin pulsing in time with his heart. He could feel something inside him shifting, an energy that wasn't human. And then, a whisper, smooth and inescapable. Do you wish to live, James? His breath hitched. The Queen. Her voice coiled around his thoughts, dark and inviting. You fight a losing battle, she murmured. I can show you how to survive. But you must trust me. Trust her. The same alien who had done this to him. The same one who had marked him. Another explosion rocked the ship. James had no time for doubts. Chen, do we have coordinates? Chen's voice was rushed but certain. Yes, but the jump drive needs 15 more seconds. They didn't have 15 seconds. James exhaled sharply and did something reckless. He reached out, not physically, but with something deeper. Somehow, in some way he didn't understand, he pushed his mind outward, toward the approaching Silari warships. It was as if he could sense them, their energy signatures, the power thrumming through their engines. And then, without thinking, he commanded them to stop. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. The enemy ships hesitated, their torpedoes still in their launch tubes. The auxiliary battlecruisers seemed to falter, as if something unseen had gripped their systems. And in that tiny moment of hesitation, "Jumping now," Chen shouted. A deafening roar filled the ship as space twisted around them, and the Valkyrie vanished into hyperspace. The aftermath. The moment they were clear, James stumbled back against the railing, his breath ragged. His entire body ached, the golden lines on his arms flaring violently before fading back into his skin. Riley was staring at him. "What the hell was that?" she asked. "Why did the auxiliary stop firing?" James had no answer. Or rather, he had one, but he didn't want to say it out loud. Because in that moment, when he had reached out to the auxiliary ships, he had felt something terrifying. They had obeyed him. The message from the Queen. Later, as James sat alone in his quarters, trying to process everything, the lights flickered. The temperature in the room dropped, and the air seemed to shimmer, warping reality itself. Then she appeared. Not physically, but in his mind. A vision, a presence, a projection of her will. Queen Seraphis. She stood before him in a veil of darkness, her crimson eyes glowing like molten suns. The golden veins on her skin pulsed in rhythm with his own. "You are beginning to understand," she said softly. James clenched his fists. "What did you do to me?" The Queen stepped closer, her voice as smooth as silk. "I gave you a gift." James let out a bitter laugh. "You call this a gift? The auxiliary want me dead. My own crew is starting to fear me. And He hesitated. "I don't even know what I'm becoming." Seraphis tilted her head. "You are evolving, James, becoming something greater." His pulse quickened. "Why? Why me?" The Queen's expression darkened. "Because the universe is about to change. War is coming, one beyond anything your kind has ever seen. And whether you accept it or not, you are now a part of it." James swallowed hard. Something about the way she said it felt true, and that terrified him. "What do you want from me?" he asked. The Queen's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "I want you to survive." Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. A future uncertain. James sat in silence, his thoughts racing. The auxiliary were hunting him. His body was changing. And the Queen had just warned him of something worse. He glanced down at his hands, hands that weren't entirely human anymore. Something told him that this was only the beginning. And whatever was coming next, it would change everything. The Queen's truth, the forbidden planet, the journey to Excelthera, the forbidden planet of the auxiliary, was a risk greater than death itself. For James Carter, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't about escaping the auxiliary warships hunting him, nor about keeping his crew safe. It was about answers. Answers that only Queen Seraphis could provide. He stood in the cockpit of the U.S. Valkyrie, staring at the massive, dark sphere of Excelthera as it hovered against the backdrop of endless space. Unlike other planets, Excelthera had no sun. It did not reflect light, nor did it cast shadows. It was as if the planet existed outside reality itself, a place where time and space were distorted. Chen's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, I really hope you know what you're doing." James smirked, though his grip on the controls was tight. "I don't." Riley sighed. "That's what I was afraid of." As they approached the surface, their ship's sensors malfunctioned one by one. Gravitational field is fluctuating. Energy spikes detected. Wait, they're gone now. We've lost visual mapping. The planet's disrupting everything. James ignored it all. He could feel something pulling him in. It wasn't just instinct, it was her. The closer they got, the louder her presence became in his mind. And then the ship stopped moving. Not by its own systems, not by gravity, by her will. A voice slid into his thoughts like silk over steel. Come to me, James. The throne of shadows. The ship landed in an alien city unlike anything James had seen before. Massive obsidian towers rose from the ground, stretching toward a sky that swirled with golden lightning. The structures shifted and pulsed, as if they were alive, breathing in the darkness. The streets were empty. No guards, no auxiliary civilians, only the presence of something ancient watching him. James walked forward, his boots echoing in the silence. His veins burned under his skin, the golden markings pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. At the center of the city stood a throne carved from pure voidstone, its dark edges glowing with an eerie blue light. And upon it sat Queen Seraphis. Her gaze met his the moment he entered, as if she had been expecting him for centuries. She rose with the grace of a predator, her obsidian black robes flowing like liquid shadows around her. The golden patterns on her skin pulsed in time with his own. They were connected, deeply, irrevocably. You have come, she murmured, her voice neither welcoming nor surprised. James exhaled, stepping forward. You knew I would. The queen tilted her head, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. Of course. Then tell me the truth, James demanded, his voice firm. What have you done to me? The curse or the gift? For the first time, Queen Seraphis did not answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward a vast mirror, one that reflected not just his image, but something deeper. James hesitated, then stepped toward it. What he saw made his breath catch. His eyes, no longer fully human. The irises burned like molten gold, shifting like a celestial storm trapped within him. His skin, no longer just flesh. The golden lines running through his veins were alive, glowing softly, whispering in an unknown language. He wasn't just changing. He was becoming something else. James clenched his fists. What is this? The queen moved beside him, her presence dangerously close, her voice like the wind before a storm. A bond older than your species, James, one that only a few have ever experienced. He turned to her, his pulse thundering. You mean this has happened before? Seraphis nodded. Long ago, but never with a human. James felt a chill crawl up his spine. Then why me? The queen's expression darkened. Because when you touched me, James, you triggered something buried deep within the ancient laws of the universe. A bond meant only for rulers, only for those strong enough to wield it. James swallowed hard. You mean? Seraphis placed one cold hand against his chest, right where his heart beat wildly. You are bound to me now, James. Her voice was almost gentle. And you have begun the transformation into something neither human nor auxiliary. James staggered back, his mind racing. No, I didn't ask for this. Yet, it has happened. James shook his head, his hands trembling. What happens if I fight it? The queen's eyes flashed, and her voice dropped to a whisper of power. Then you will burn from the inside out. The truth hit him like a collapsing star. He had no choice. He was becoming something beyond human. Something tied to the queen. Something that Hilary feared. And there was no going back. The warning. James felt the weight of her words, the crushing finality of it. But he wasn't done yet. He straightened, his hands clenching into fists. What do you really want from me? Seraphis studied him, as if deciding how much more truth to reveal. Then she spoke. The shrouded ones are coming. James frowned. Who? Seraphis' gaze turned distant. A species so old even my kind speaks their name in whispers. They do not conquer, they do not negotiate. They erase. James exhaled sharply. And you think I'm the answer? The Queen turned to him fully, her expression unreadable. You are something new, James. You are the first human to carry the mark of a Xilari Queen. Her eyes bored into his soul. And the only one who may survive what is coming. The weight of those words settled deep into his chest. This wasn't just about his own survival anymore. It was about something far bigger. James closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them. Determined. Ready. Whatever he was becoming, he would find a way to control it. Because if war was coming, he sure as hell wasn't going to lose. War against the Queen's enemies, a galaxy on the edge of war. The moment James Carter left Xelthera, he knew everything had changed. He wasn't just a human captain anymore. He was something else. A man marked by the most powerful alien empire in the galaxy, bound to a queen whose people now feared and hunted him. And worse, he had learned the truth. The Shrouded Ones were coming. An enemy older than time. A force that did not conquer, but erased entire civilizations from history. And somehow, he was supposed to stand in their way. James stared out of the viewport of the U.S. Valkyrie, watching the distant stars streak by as they traveled through hyperspace. The ship had barely escaped Xilari space, but the hunt was far from over. The Xilari still wanted him dead. His own people would never trust what he had become. And the Queen? She had left him with more questions than answers. His hands clenched into fists as he looked down at them. The golden veins beneath his skin flared and pulsed with alien energy. Was it growing stronger? Somewhere deep inside, he knew the truth. He was running out of time. The first attack. Multiple enemy signatures detected. Chen's voice rang through the ship's comms, sending a chill down James' spine. He rushed to the bridge, where Commander Riley and the crew were already at battle stations. "Who is it?" James demanded. Riley's face was pale. Not Xilari. Something else. James froze. On the central screen, he saw them. A fleet of unknown black ships, their surfaces shifting like liquid shadow. They moved in perfect silence, their formations precise and unnatural. And then they vanished. Not into hyperspace, into nothing. James' stomach twisted. That's impossible. Chen's voice was tight with fear. It's them, isn't it? James didn't need to answer. They all knew. The Shrouded Ones had arrived. The battle begins. The Valkyrie shuddered violently as an unseen force slammed into it, sending sparks across the control panels. Shields failing. Weapons offline. They're inside the ship. James' blood turned cold. He turned just in time to see a black mist slither through the walls, moving like liquid smoke. And then, from the mist, they emerged. They had no faces, only shifting forms of shadow wrapped in glistening black armor. Their eyes, if they had any, burned with a deep otherworldly hunger. And James felt them in his mind. A cold whisper slid into his thoughts, ancient and suffocating. You are not supposed to exist. James gritted his teeth. Yeah, too bad. The first shrouded warrior lunged. James barely had time to react before his body moved on its own. His golden veins flared, and suddenly he was faster, stronger, more precise. He dodged the attack with inhuman speed, his hands glowing with raw power. He didn't even think, he just fought. His punch connected with the shrouded warrior's chest, and to his shock, it shattered like glass, dissolving into mist. James staggered back, his own breath coming in harsh gasps. What the hell had he just done? The other shrouded warriors hesitated. And then they spoke. The mark of the void, the Queen's champion. James' pulse thundered in his ears. They recognized him, and they feared him. But why? The Queen's warning. Before James could question it, the ship lurched violently, and the entire fleet of shrouded ships vanished, not retreating, not jumping to hyperspace, just disappearing like ghosts. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, a single transmission came through. A voice he knew too well. Queen Seraphis. Now you understand, James. James exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. No, I really don't. The Queen's voice remained calm. They know what you are now. And they will come again. Next time, they will not run. James gritted his teeth. Then tell me what I am. A pause. Then, you are the key. James felt his stomach tighten. To what? Seraphis' voice softened. To everything. Before he could respond, the transmission ended. James stood there, staring at the empty screen, his heart hammering. The auxiliary wanted him dead. The shrouded ones feared him. And the Queen had chosen him. For what? He didn't know. But one thing was clear. This war had only just begun. The betrayal and the Queen's weakness. The nightmare that wasn't a dream. James Carter had never feared sleep before. But now, every time he closed his eyes, he found himself somewhere else. Not aboard the U.S. Valkyrie. Not in his quarters. But in a place outside of time and space. A vast, endless void stretched before him. The very fabric of reality, shifting like a living ocean of black and gold. Stars bled light into the abyss, collapsing into spirals that defied logic. And at the center of it all, standing atop a floating obsidian platform, was her. Queen Seraphis. James could feel her before he even saw her, her presence wrapping around him like an invisible force, pulling him closer. She stood there, silent, waiting, her crimson eyes glowing against the cosmic dark. The golden lines on her skin pulsed in perfect harmony with his own. James clenched his fists. He wasn't here by choice. What is this place? He demanded. The Queen tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. The space between worlds. A place where only we can exist. James swallowed, glancing down at his own hands. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the fact that he was here, or the fact that he wasn't afraid anymore. The transformation was accelerating. He was becoming something else. Something not human. Seraphis took a slow step forward. You are resisting, she said softly, fighting against what you are meant to become. James stared her down, refusing to let her voice shake him. And what exactly is that? The Queen exhaled. The only one who can stop the coming war. James let out a sharp laugh. You mean your war? You still haven't told me the truth. Seraphis met his gaze. You believe I am using you. James stepped forward now, his anger building. Aren't you? A pulse of energy rippled between them. For a moment, James saw something in her eyes, a flicker of something deeper. Regret. Pain. Then her expression hardened. The truth is more complicated than you think, James. James felt it then. A shift in the air. A tiny hesitation in her voice. And he knew. She was hiding something. And that meant she had a weakness. The betrayal unfolds. Back in the waking world, James sat in the war room of the U.S. Valkyrie, staring at the holographic star map. Riley and Chen stood across from him, their faces lined with concern. So let me get this straight, Riley said, arms crossed. The Queen says you're some kind of chosen warrior. James exhaled, rubbing his temples. She thinks I'm the key to stopping the shrouded ones. But she's not telling me everything. Chen frowned. Why would she lie? James' jaw clenched. Because she needs me. And I don't trust people who need me. Silence hung in the air. Finally, Riley spoke. So, what do we do? James didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the glowing golden lines on his arms. And then he made a decision. We find out what she's hiding. The descent into forbidden knowledge. The auxiliary empire had ruled for thousands of years. But every empire had its secrets. James knew that if Seraphis had a weakness, it wouldn't be in some open archive. It would be buried deep, hidden away where only those who sought the truth could find it. And so he took the biggest risk of his life. He used the very bond she had placed upon him against her. For the first time, he didn't fight the connection. He dived into it. The moment he opened his mind, he was pulled in violently, visions flooding through him like a storm, thousands of years of memories compressing into seconds. He saw a war long forgotten. He saw a younger Queen Seraphis standing alone against an unseen enemy, her people falling around her. He saw a desperate bargain made with forces beyond understanding. And then, a final image. A prison. Buried deep beneath the capital of the Siluri Empire. A prison where something ancient was locked away. Something Seraphis had feared for centuries. James gasped as he was thrown back into his own body, his breath ragged. Riley grabbed his shoulder. "James, what the hell just happened?" James looked up, eyes wide. "She's hiding something. Asterisk, 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 something powerful. The Queen's weakness revealed." James didn't wait. Within hours, he led a strike team to the Siluri homeworld, breaking through their outer defenses with the Valkyrie's last reserves of power. They landed near the hidden prison he had seen in his vision, a towering structure built into the core of the planet itself. As they descended into the depths, James felt the bond with Seraphis weaken. She didn't want him to be here, which meant he was in the right place. At the bottom of the prison, sealed behind layers of energy fields and ancient alien glyphs, was a massive containment chamber. Inside, suspended in pure void energy, was a second Siluri queen, frozen, unmoving, identical to Seraphis. James' breath caught. "No, that's impossible." Then, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice James knew too well. Seraphis. She appeared before him, her form flickering with barely controlled rage. "You should not have come here, James." James stared at the frozen figure, then back at her, and suddenly, everything clicked. This isn't a prison. Asterisk, 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 it's a tomb. Seraphis' face darkened. "You do not understand." James cut her off. "Oh, I think I do." Asterisk, 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 asterisk. "You're not the first Queen Seraphis." Silence. Then, a whisper. "No." James took a slow step forward. "And if you're not the first, that means you're not the last." Seraphis' expression remained calm, but James could see it now. The fear. She was dying. And she had chosen him as her replacement. The final realization. James' stomach twisted. He wasn't just some warrior. He wasn't a hero. He was a vessel. A new ruler being prepared. "You never wanted to save me," he whispered. "You wanted to make me like you." Seraphis closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them, her voice was almost, "I warned you, James." Her words from the very beginning echoed in his mind. "Dare touch me again, human, and suffer." And now he finally understood. Because the real question wasn't whether he could resist the bond. It was whether he had already lost. The final decision and the fate of two species. The weight of a dying empire. James Carter stood in the depths of the Siluri capital, the cold glow of alien glyphs casting eerie shadows against the dark chamber walls. The tomb of the past queens stood before him, silent and unyielding. And floating within the containment field, locked in the embrace of pure void energy, was the truth he had not been ready to face. The first Queen Seraphis, or perhaps the real one. The one who had ruled before the Seraphis he knew, before the one who had marked him, changed him, and dragged him into this war. The air hummed with power, thick and suffocating. The weight of 1,000 years of secrets pressed down on his shoulders. Behind him, Riley and Chen stood frozen, their weapons raised but useless against the forces at play here. And across from him, standing like a goddess sculpted from shadow and fire, was her, Queen Seraphis, the one who had claimed him, the one who had warned him, the one who was dying. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those crimson eyes that had haunted his every waking moment, held something he had never seen in them before: desperation. She needed him, and that terrified him more than anything else. The choice that shouldn't exist. James exhaled sharply, forcing himself to speak past the tightness in his throat. You planned this from the start. Seraphis said nothing. James took a step closer, the golden veins under his skin glowing brighter, mirroring the pulse of energy from the containment field. He could feel the connection between them growing stronger, could feel the power she was trying to pass on to him. And he understood now. The auxiliary queens did not live forever. They were replaced, not by heirs, not by willing successors, by chosen vessels, by those who were forced to inherit their throne. And she had chosen him. James clenched his fists. How many times have you done this? Seraphis exhaled slowly. Enough times to know that resistance is futile. And what happens if I refuse? Asterisk, 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 what happens if I don't become your replacement? The queen tilted her head. Then the auxiliary fall. Her words hung in the air, a blade poised to strike. James felt the weight of them, the terrifying finality of what she was saying. He was not just making a choice for himself. He was making a choice for an entire civilization, a species on the edge of war, a people who had ruled for thousands of years, now standing at the precipice of extinction. And he was the only one who could save them. The shrouded ones return. Before James could speak, the ground trembled beneath them. The chamber shook violently, alien glyphs flaring to life with a desperate pulse of warning. Then, a sound like reality itself being torn apart. James' heart pounded as he turned toward the entrance. A massive tear in space had opened, rippling outward in spirals of shadow and golden lightning. And from it, they emerged. The shrouded ones had come. Hundreds of them, their twisted black armor shifting like liquid darkness. Their presence filled the air with an unnatural cold, suffocating in its intensity. They did not attack. Not immediately. Instead, one stepped forward, its form taller and more defined than the others. A leader. And then, it spoke. The cycle must end. James felt a sharp pain rip through his skull, as if something ancient had gripped his mind and squeezed. The shrouded one raised a hand, pointing directly at him. You are the last mistake of the auxiliary. James staggered back, his pulse hammering in his ears. He could feel what they meant. They didn't just want the auxiliary destroyed. They wanted him erased, because he was something that shouldn't exist. Something new. Something that could break the cycle. The queen's plea. Seraphis stepped forward, her power radiating in waves, her voice cold and absolute. You will not take him. The shrouded leader did not waver. He does not belong to you. James turned to her, his mind racing. Why do they fear me? Seraphis did not look at him. Because you are not bound by our laws. James frowned. What does that mean? The queen's gaze finally met his, and this time, he saw the raw truth in her eyes. It means that you have a choice. The words hit him harder than any weapon ever could. For thousands of years, the auxiliary had followed the same cycle. One queen fading, another rising. No one had ever broken it. No one had ever defied the bond. But James, he was human. He could choose. And that was what the shrouded ones feared most. That was why they wanted him dead. Because if he could break the cycle, he could end it forever. The war, the rulers, the endless struggle. All of it. The final decision. James took a slow, shuddering breath. He turned to Seraphis. You lied to me. She did not deny it. He turned to the shrouded leader. And you want me dead, don't you? The creature did not deny it either. James let out a bitter laugh. So either I die, or I become something I never wanted to be. Silence. He felt his heart beat slow. His mind cleared. And for the first time since this all began, he saw the path forward. His own path. Not Seraphis. Not the shrouded ones. His. James raised his hands, not in surrender, but in command. The golden veins beneath his skin flared brighter than ever before, radiating a power that had not belonged to any ruler before him. His power. And he spoke the words that changed everything. The cycle ends now. The chamber shook violently, the air crackling with power as something new ignited within him. Not Silari, not human, not bound by fate. Something greater. Seraphi's eyes widened. The shrouded ones stepped back, because for the first time, someone had refused the throne. And the universe itself trembled. The fate of two species. What came next would be written into legend. The war did not end in fire. It did not end in blood. It ended because one man made a choice no one had made before. James Carter, the first and only of his kind, walked away from the throne. And in doing so, he broke the chains of an empire that had existed for millennia. The Silari would never be the same. The shrouded ones would never return. Because now, for the first time, the future belonged to no one but him.